Hi guys and welcome back. 2 years ago LAiV Audio was born, and in just 2 years they were able to release a full-blown R2R DAC and then a dedicated preamplifier and headphone amplifier that was selling together for almost $5,800. A year later they came up with a smaller R2R DAC, more affordable one, and also with a DDC that will further elevate its performance. Yet people were still asking for an all-in-one solution that will have all of the necessary digital inputs and analog outputs, including headphone outputs and a full-blown preamplifier at less than $1,000. That is no easy task, but these guys were able to pull this off. This guy is called LAiV Crescendo Verse. It goes for $849. And let's check it out with a bunch of headphones, IEMs and loudspeakers. What's cool about the Crescendo Verse is that while the price went down considerably, the build quality and also the easy-to-use UI weren't compromised at all. So everything you see is made out of aluminum, the backplate, the top plate, everything really, including the buttons, are metallic. Also, we have some tiny metallic feet like we had on that micro DAC and micro DDC with tiny rubber inlays. So everything is made out of metal, which I like quite a lot. The only part that is not so great looking is this plasticky remote control, but it's understandable. A metallic remote control would add a lot to the cost, which was not the scope of this project. Controlling it is incredibly simple. We have just an on-off button on the left and a menu and select button on the right, including the volume knob, which acts as a menu navigator. Once you start navigating its UI, you'll find the regular non-oversampling and oversampling mode. You can enable oversampling up to 16 times, which is pretty cool. It can even do DSD resampling or DSD multi-bit mode if you please. And before you ask, this one does native true 1-bit DSD processing. And if you listen to a lot of super audio CDs like I do, then it will be incredibly hard going back to listening to regular CDs after hearing that purity of tone and texture. Although it's incredibly small, it still rocks 4 of the most important digital inputs like I2S, coaxial, optical and USB, and a pair of RCA and XLR analog outputs. The voltage can be fixed or not, since this one can also act as a dedicated preamplifier, working fully in analog domain and having an actual active preamplifier stage inside. We have a decently sized display. It's a 25:7 dot matrix display with 3 brightness levels available, and if it bothers you late night, then you can disable it completely. The LED ring is quite generous, and I could practically read it from my comfy sofa across the room. Having a look inside, I was surprised how packed everything is in there. Although it's powered by an external 30-watt switching mode power supply, this one more exactly, we still get a solid voltage regulation stage, including a beefy filtering. Next comes the digital side. We have a digital receiver, more exactly an SPDIF receiver from IEM, together with an ARM CPU. The Altera FPGA chip is next, that does so many things, including the native 1-bit DSD decoding. You can also see 2 femtosecond clocks. I presume these are probably Crystech clocks that you can see in plenty of top-grade DACs of today. On the left side you can see the R2R ladders. These are no longer encapsulated like it was the case on the micro DAC or Harmony DAC, but these are still using 0.05 precision resistors, which can be found in super expensive R2R DACs. Next up you can see the beefy output stage that uses tons of discrete components. We even have 2 relays on top, meaning that the volume always works in analog domain. There is no digital attenuation, so you can easily use this guy as a DAC and active preamp if you wish so. Lastly, you can see a huge heatsink on the right, and right under it the headphone amplifier circuit is located. It's a fully balanced and fully discrete circuit, and a couple of transistors are resting under it that provide up to 1.1 watts of power on its 4.4mm balanced output and 230 milliwatts of power on the regular 1/4-inch headphone jack. Last but not least, for a long service life, we have a couple of protection systems for its headphone amplifier section, like overload, overheat, DC protection, so all of that is actually very good. I hope everything is clear now, how it works, what's inside it, and the last thing we need to do is to hit some eardrums and to tell you how it sounds. Having the marketing materials in advance and seeing those Odyssey LCD5 and also the Hive Monsters bar unveiled in some of those shots, I was very skeptical that just 1.1 watts of power will be enough to drive these headphones. And these are not your ordinary headphones. These are basically the hardest to drive planar headphones available. So about 30 seconds later, after connecting, the Hive Monsters bar unveiled on its 4.4mm balanced output. All of my skepticism was simply thrown out of the window because it was nicely driving these headphones and I had still plenty of headroom remaining on top. Mind you, I'm listening pretty loud, about 90, sometimes 95 dB, and the maximum volume I could reach was minus 10 dB on its display, so there was plenty of volume still available. It's plenty powerful, I believe, and it can drive pretty much everything. Actually, all of my headphone wall was nicely driven by this one, and if it nicely drives the Susvara unveiled, then everything else is really unnecessary to talk about. Perhaps what's even more impressive is that this little guy was pumping some serious energy in the bass, sounding exactly how I would describe a Class A fully discrete headphone amplifier. So it was punchy, it was powerful in the bass, it was controlled, and it was very clean sounding in the bass region as well. This feature isn't a gimmick, I believe, it's not an overlook, because it sounds like a proper headphone amplifier, having all of the skills that I'm usually getting from desktop, dedicated, Class A and fully discrete headphone amplifiers. So every single headphone that I have in my stable worked fantastic on the Crescendo verse, and to be frank with you, most of my listening didn't happen in my stereo setup as I'm usually doing, but in my office via a couple of headphones, because I couldn't believe how good it sounds with headphones. While on paper it offers only 1.1 watts of power, it sounded as if I had more power under that tiny hood. Switching mode power supplies and ultra-sensitive IEMs usually don't get that well together, but in this case, what follows after that switching mode power supply is even more important. In this case, we have a couple of V-regs and a pretty nice filtering stage, and I really hope to get a clean sound on that 4.4mm balanced output on low gain with all of my IEMs, and that's exactly what I've got. So on the low gain, I could go even on the maximum volume, and I couldn't tell if the unit was powered on. So that's all you need to know about this one in terms of noise floor. It's simply dead silent with everything that I have at my disposal. These are Hi-B Zeta 2. I also have the Fio FX17. Both are multi-driver IEMs, both are easily sniffing the noise floor of desktop components, but that wasn't really the case with this device. There is a little bit of hiss on medium gain and high gain, but there is completely none on low gain, and mind you, there's plenty of volume to play with, so I can say that this one is simply IEM friendly and it works fantastic with IEMs. That's all you need to know. In the end, it works marvelous with ultra-sensitive loads like IEMs and also with hard-to-drive planars, so I believe it will make proper justice to both of them. 2 days later, I moved it to my stereo setup and I disconnected my DAC, I disconnected my preamp, and I let it work as a dedicated DAC and preamplifier. I only used my Onyx XST20 CD/Super Audio CD transport via an HDMI cable, and of course I've used this I2S connection. A minute didn't pass and I could swear, even with my eyes closed, that I was listening to an R2R ladder DAC and not to a chip-based Delta Sigma solution. Another 5 minutes passed and the only thing that I wanted to do is just to listen to music. I didn't care about technicalities, resolution, transient response, soundstage. I just wanted to listen to some tunes, to relax myself, so I put my phone on silent, I just crossed my feet, I closed my eyes and I let the music do its mojo. Another 30 minutes passed and I felt exactly what I have already experienced on the micro DAC and also on the big guy on the Harmony DAC. The little guy was slowly putting me in a semi-sleepy state. The fuel warmer had a similar effect on me and I'm getting similar vibes from my own R2R ladder DAC. The more music I was adding to the playlist, the more I started appreciating its thick tone and timbre that is sometimes so difficult to render by chip-based Delta Sigma solutions, and yet it's a child's play on these R2R ladder DACs. And yes, as its older brothers, this one carries the same richness, the same sweet tonality, the same full-bodied presentation, and the same timbre that people fell in love with. The interesting part is that it's not influencing the frequency response in any way, at least quantity-wise nothing seems to be raised or rolled off in any region, yet it knows how to put a lot of emotion back into the music, and it does that by default. So it doesn't matter if you are staying on non-oversampling or oversampling mode, it always carries that bold tonality no matter what. So I cannot say it's adding a lot of coloration to the music, but the contrast and inner texture is definitely boosted, getting a thicker sound at the end of the day. The third part which I observed is that the crescendo verse is ever so slightly clearer, you could say more detailed versus the micro DAC. I know it sounds like heresy, but I double checked, I triple checked. This one is slightly more in control, it's tighter, it's faster, the leading edges are sharper, and therefore I can hear some additional nuances, especially above 10 kHz versus the micro DAC. I'm not really sure, maybe the active preamp stage is making the sound a little bit tighter, faster, punchier, but there is definitely a change versus the micro DAC. I personally like these traits. I like a punchier sounding DAC versus a slightly softer and mellower DAC like the micro DAC is. So it's slightly different in this regard, but I'd say it's a bit more resolving and a little bit tighter. It's a clean and detailed sounding R2R ladder DAC. A combination of words I'm rarely using to describe the sound of an entry-level R2R DAC, but it seems to have an exception on the Crescendo verse. The fourth part I want to discuss is the amount of air it brings over with every musical note. The output stage and volume control implementation are usually the ones to condemn or hail when it comes to stereophonic effects, soundstage, depth, imaging, and so on. In this case, we do not have digital attenuation, we have a pretty normal volume control working in analog domain, and the output stage is made only from discrete components, probably working in class A operation. So this one is always trying to decompress the music and mimic the sound of big R2R DACs. It's not sounding bigger than life, and it's not trying to push the sound above the borders of this room, but at least it's trying to mimic this kind of sound. More importantly, it's not becoming aggressive and it's not adding any artifacts of its own when I'm going slightly louder or much louder than usual. I like that it's not becoming shouty, it's not becoming harsh. When listening to music above 90, even 95 dB, it always kept its composure without botching the soundstage or the imaging. It's easily on the same level when it comes to soundstage and 3D effects with the Eversolo DMP A8, and I'd say on the same level with the Tapping D900, which costlier devices, I believe twice the price of this one, and that could be seen as a compliment for the little guy. Lastly, I was curious to try a linear power supply with the Crescendo verse, something that I already did with that micro DAC and micro DDC. In my case, adding a Kisses P14 to the micro DDC brought very little improvements to almost at all, yet I've heard a pretty nice improvement on the micro DAC. In the case of the Crescendo verse, the improvements were bigger compared to the micro DAC, but those were not really transformative like what I experienced when I tried the Fusion Core on a Barson Audio DAC combo. In my case, adding that Kisses P14 brought maybe a 15% improvement when working as a DAC only, in noise control, in speed, resolution and tightness, and it was maybe a 20% improvement when working as a DAC and preamp or as a DAC and headphone amplifier. What's interesting is that when it worked as a DAC and headphone amplifier, I could definitely hear that the bass is not just tighter, but a little bit punchier sounding as well. The positive changes were easier to spot via top-of-the-line headphones because I was basically bypassing room acoustics and I could hear those micro details and changes in intensity much easier. And yes, I believe that it sounds even punchier and a bit livelier, I'd say, with an external power supply. If you check LAiV's website right now, in between those marketing materials and product shots, you can see this one staying on top of a slightly taller device with 3 buttons and 2 LEDs. That is not the micro DDC or micro DAC, that is a different device. I can only presume, but I don't know, that we're dealing with a dedicated linear power supply that is specifically designed for the Crescendo verse, but we'll find about that in the coming months, I hope. You probably know by now that I'm using both headphones and loudspeakers, and that is not going to change anytime soon. Besides writing and also filming these reviews for you guys, I'm also a husband and a father to a young lad, so of course this space needs to be shared with my family. When I'm alone, I'm listening to my loudspeakers, but when my personal space is invaded, I'm simply moving to my office and I start listening to headphones. And in the right conditions, with the right gear, with the right headphones, I believe that these two experiences are very similar, headphones and loudspeakers. So for me personally, this is the most interesting device that LAiV Audio has ever created, and what's more important is that not a single feature was overlooked or put there as an extra bonus. Its active preamp stage is simply godsend, the headphone amplifier is fully discrete, and it drives my entire headphone collection, and it's completely noiseless on low gain with my IEMs. And of course, its organic and natural sounding art while at the DAC section is exactly why you want to buy a unit like this. All of these features work great in unison, and none of them were overlooked on the Crescendo verse. And from the 8 videos that I posted in 2026 this year, I believe this is the first one that truly impressed me and deserves my highly impressive award. Because there's nothing more to say about this one. This is a highly impressive sounding unit. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, dislike, maybe subscribe if you found this video helpful. And I'll see you soon with an Overkill Tube headphone amplifier. See you soon. Cheers.